welcome to today's program, which is entitled This, Not That. Since it is Invasive Exotic Plant Awareness Week, we are bringing you different programs that we have done regarding invasive exotic plants. And this is kind of a follow-up to Seductive Invaders, which is on my Facebook page a little further down from this. And this is beautiful native plants to replace problem plants that you may have. So we are going to suggest this, not that. I am Lily Browning. I'm the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program Coordinator, and I work for Hernando County Utilities in the Water Department. If you have any questions, or if you would like a PDF copy of this particular program, please email me. My email is below. It's Lilly B with 2 L's in the middle at hernandocounty.us. Here are the 9 principles of Florida friendly landscaping. And when we were talking about invasive exotic plants, we really need to cover right plant, right place. As I mentioned in the program prior to this, Seductive Invaders, I don't believe there are any bad plants, but there are plants that are the wrong plant in the wrong place. And it wasn't the plants who decided to be in the wrong place. Generally, it is the activity of humans that have brought the plants to the wrong environment. And it just causes chaos in the environment. So, and we discussed that in Seductive Invaders in detail, but now I'm going to suggest alternatives. These happen to be native alternatives. There are many what we call well-behaved exotics that also may do well. This one is just focusing on natives in replacement for the invasive exotics. There is a watchdog organization out there called Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council. They go by FLEPC. They have created 2 different categories of invasive plants. So category 1 are the ones that have been proven to alter native plant communities by displacing native species, changing community structures or ecological functions, or hybridizing with natives. So they are proven to be a big problem in the environment. So let's discuss this one. We discussed it in Seductive Invaders, this Brazilian pepper. This is one of 2 trees in Hernando County that by ordinance, you're not allowed to have this tree on your property. If you own the property in any way, shape, or form, and you have this tree on it, you're going to get a letter telling you to remove that tree. This one and the white lead tree are the only 2 that are by ordinance, you will be asked to remove from your property. All these others can be on your property and no one is going to bother you about it, but it's still something you should know about, and you should know about, the chaos that they could be bringing to our plant world. But the Brazilian pepper and the white lead tree are most likely to be found west of 19 in Hernando County, although there are stands east of 19 as well. This is just, causing all kinds of terrible problems. And as we said in the Seductive Invaders, and why I named it that is because they do have good attributes. As I said, there's not really bad plants. There are plants that have been or naturalized in the wrong place. Yeah, the Brazilian pepper is pretty. All of these plants are pretty. Beekeepers love the Brazilian pepper because bees love the Brazilian pepper, and they make nice honey. So, there's good and bad to all things. But if you're driving down I-4 headed south, or Many other places you can see where it's just a monoculture of Brazilian pepper. And then that does not allow our native ecosystems to be in place as they should. So what if you happen to have Brazilian pepper and you got that letter saying you've got to remove this from your property? What would be something good and native to replace it with? I think Dahoon hollies. Really, any kind of native hollies would be a good idea. But this Dahoon holly is going to give you kind of the same look, have the red berries, and be appropriate, for our area and for the wildlife that we have. It's going to and look very nice there for you and not cause chaos in the environment. The lead tree that I mentioned, the white lead tree, that it is also an invasive exotic, that by Hernando County ordinance, if it's in your yard, you will be not asked, but you will be told to remove it. A lot of times what happens with the Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council, or FLEPC, is, like I said, they're the watchdog group, and they keep an eye on these plants, and they alert the state and federal authorities, so that when it meets a certain standard, then the state or the federal government will step in and start to regulate these plants. I think almost every category 1 FLEPC plant is regulated by the state or even by the federal government. Usually it is left up to the states because, each state is different, has its own microclimate. What might be a problem in Florida may not be a problem up north. We are pretty much a greenhouse here. I believe that Florida and Hawaii have, the most invasive exotic plants. So we need to be more particular as well. But this is regulated by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and you can't possess it, propagate it, sell it, or transport it. So if you happen to have this white lead tree, what's a good replacement for it when you're told to take it away? Well, if you live on the coast, mangroves are a beautiful native that, they provide nurseries for the fish, and they provide areas for birds. The bees do love them, other wildlife. They can be a little aggressive as well, but that might be what you're looking for if you're looking for screening. And they love the coastal areas, and they will have the white flowers year round. Here's another one that I know nobody is purposefully, you couldn't go out and buy this air potato. And most of these plants are, the sale of them is prohibited. But what happens is someone moves here and thinks, ooh, this is pretty. Look at it, it's growing all by itself. And then they may give a piece of it to a neighbor who also likes it. And that's how these invasive exotics also get spread around. So I don't know anyone who truly likes this air potato because it becomes so aggressive, even though it is not unattractive with its nice heart-shaped leaves. But I do know someone who, he's very ecologically minded, but he even mentioned when air potato beetles, which have been introduced after a very long, probably decade-long study by the University of Florida, that the air potato beetles do not consume anything else even closely related, let alone not related to this air potato. And somebody once asked me, well, if the beetles run out of air potato, what do? They just die? And the answer is yes. Yeah, they are very that host specific, but also they take care. They know how to work the system. These beetles are not intended to eradicate the air potato. They're not going to completely wipe out the only thing that they have to eat, but they take a good chunk out of it. So if you have air potato and you have noticed in recent years it is full of little holes all in the leaves, that's what these beetles do, these cute little red beetles. And so that the leaves can't photosynthesize, so that these stands of air potato might be greatly decreased. You still need to pick up those potatoes, those tubers, and throw them away with your kitchen trash. Don't try to compost them, don't do anything like that. The starch and carbohydrates stored up in those tubers are just absolutely unreal. Years ago, when I worked for the county extension office, we would have what we call air potato roundups. And somebody brought in a bag of these air potatoes. And for whatever reason, it was in a plastic bag. That bag just kind of got thrown on the floor in a corner. We looked at it 6 months later. It was leafing out. Some of those potatoes were leafing out. 0 water, 0 light. And that's how much energy and carbohydrates are stored up in those. So pick those up, throw them away so that with your kid or with your household trash, so that it goes to the landfill and gets buried. But that gentleman I know is very ecologically minded. The beetles came and he was happy to see the air potato be, controlled. But he said, yeah, but now I've kind of lost my screening that I had with the neighbors. So, there are other different vines and things you can put up in place of that invasive exotic air potato. Moonflower will give you kind of the same look. Now, it is more of a tropical plant and it could freeze here. So does the air potato. But generally, these plants come back. We haven't had any freezes that really kill roots of these plants. They generally come back. It's called a moonflower because instead of being a morning glory, which it looks like, it likes late afternoon into evening. And it can be a little aggressive, but that might be what you're looking for when it comes to screening. Chinese privet. That's, just a shrub that is just a general shrub, but this Chinese version, Ligustrum sinense, has become quite invasive, especially further south. And so before you go about thinking, or if you already have some of these, and thinking, what should you replace them with? Better alternative is this native wax myrtle. You can prune it into a small tree. You can prune it into a bush. And it attracts wildlife. And it will grow just fine with little maintenance from you once it is established, but not go out of control like the Chinese privet tends to do. Again, here's another plant that you're not going to purposefully go out and buy, this old world climbing fern, but maybe somewhere out there, your neighbors had it and you thought you would like a piece and you grew some, or it's just encroaching and you want to get rid of it, but you still sort of like the look. A good replacement would be this native false indigo. Grows up to about 12 feet. It does like a moist habitat, light to moderate shade, but it is a host plant to the long-tailed skipper butterfly, and it will also bring you some violet-colored blooms in the spring. Coral argesia. This one is all over. And no, you can't buy it, but this even happened to me years ago. A relative brought me a piece of this saying, look, this is growing in our mother's yard all by itself and it's beautiful. Well, I did plant it, but luckily I came to realize about invasive exotics and this particular one soon enough that I was able to pull it out and throw it away. And I've seen it in stands of undeveloped lots just really take over. Yes, it's pretty. It's gorgeous. Has red berries. This particular photo doesn't, and it has red berries. It has the white flowers. It has the beautiful scalloped leaves. But again, it offers zero benefit to wildlife and just tries to take over. If you happen to have some and want to get rid of it, looking for a replacement, this wild coffee. Sometimes they get confused with each other, but you can see there is, there's a difference. This has much smaller, darker green leaves with scalloped edges. This has much bigger leaves, very deeply veined, comes to a point, smooth edges. This is just a wonderful butterfly nectar plant. Has white small flowers in the spring and summer. It likes a moist habitat, but it'll grow pretty tall for you as well. It's a wild coffee. As you see from the Latin name here, which is probably my favorite Latin name, do not attempt to make any kind of coffee or anything edible out of this. Do not try that at home. Australian pine, beautiful, beautiful trees. And a lot of people who grew up in Florida may have said, well, we grew up with those. We had picnics in the shade on the beach under those, and they're just so pretty. Well, yes, they are pretty. We still have some here, like in Arequipa in Hernando County. And yes, they're very pretty. But what happens is they create such dense stands. I have a photograph of one when we were doing a beach cleanup and we're in Arequipa, and you have to look very, very hard to see the person inside that stand who was picking trash up off the floor. They create off the ground. They create very dense stands. They outcompete anything that is supposed to naturally grow there. They are very weak. Many of these invasive exotics, by their very nature, because they grow quickly and reproduce quickly, also that means that they are weak. And when we are in Florida, we do not want to think about trees this big, this tall near our house. That's weak in storms. So the other problems that these cause, when they do fall, because they have such a shallow root system, they take up many feet of ground around with them when they do fall. Their shallow root system also becomes a problem for the nesting sea turtles. That, because the sand is not as it's supposed to be because of all these roots in the way. And the same thing with the American crocodiles. So it's a very huge problem. So if you have these and you're thinking, I probably should get rid of them because they could spread and make more of them, a great alternative would be this native bald cypress. It gets tall like the Australian pines. It likes the same type of habitats. Predators love to sit up and watch them. This bottom photograph shows you what they look like in the fall. That's why they're called bald cypress, because they're actually deciduous. So they get this lovely rusty color in the fall. And then through our short winter, we'll not have anything, just be branches. And then about now, start branching out again. Lovely alternative. This I've seen growing here in northwestern Hernando County in the undeveloped lots, and they are pretty. This mimosa or silk tree. And I've even had my own husband ask me about them when they're blooming in the woods as we drive by, saying, "Oh, that's pretty. Can we have one of those?" And so that just, it shows how attractive, how seductive some of these invaders can be. And but it's going to take over, and with just this fluff and everything, spread by the wind and become a terrible problem. So what is a good replacement? Not quite pink, but this Chickasaw plum is a wonderful native replacement that will attract wildlife to eat the plums and be just a very nice small tree. If you're looking really for that pink fluff, a non-native to consider would be a Chinese fringe bush or a loropetalum, which would also do better in your yard. Okay, those were all category ones. Now, meaning that they are some state or federal organization is regulating them. Category 2 here means that FLEPC is watching them. They haven't quite altered the native plant communities to the extent of category 1, but they're probably going to. Means they're watching them, watching you very closely. And so it's not something we want to get into if it's going to end up most likely being a problem in our yard. China berry tree all over Spring Hill. People planted these like crazy. They do, I mean, those berries, the birds take them, replant them all over the place. Naturalizes quite quickly. They do make very nice, tall shade trees. And they are allelopathic. What does that big long word mean here? That means they emit a chemical that disallows any other kind of plant to grow around them. So that's, can be very much a problem for an invasive exotic tree as well. A better alternative, if you are taking down your China berry tree, if it's getting old or too tall, or you're worried about how quickly it grows, or you're tired of tiny baby China berry trees all around your yard, a good replacement would be this winged elm. Just a very nice native. Why is it called a winged elm? Because of these corky growths on its stem that's supposed to be there. It's perfectly natural. And this tree offers you no litter, unlike this tree, which offers you plenty of leaf and berry and baby China berry trees. This one will not give you any of that. So it's going to be a much better alternative and less maintenance for you. Coral vine, again, very pretty. See it grow in many places, heart-shaped leaves. I think it's also called coral love vine because of the heart-shaped leaves. Beautiful pink flowers, but it's a fast-growing vine. It naturalizes quickly, and the seeds you can spread by seeds or underground tubers. You can see it growing where nobody put it, and that's usually kind of a telltale sign. So a better alternative, same coloration, is this native passion vine. Be careful with passion vines as well, because there are non-native invasive varieties, such as the yellow and red twin flower passion vines. Get the purple passion vine, Passiflora incarnata. This is going to be aggressive as well. But here in Central Florida, it's usually going to freeze back, so then you can start all over again. But if you have an area that you want, wildly covered, and will make these amazingly intricate, wild and crazy flowers for you that are, it's a host plant for our zebra longwing, which is our Florida state butterfly, and also for the Gulf fritillary. And if you just want a vine that's going to really do a good job screening an area for you, this is a much, much, much better alternative. Okay, lots of people love our golden rain tree because they're pretty. And I'm not saying they're not. In the fall, they give you some fall color, which is, an unusual thing to have here in Florida. And you get it from the yellow that it puts out, and as well as these kind of salmon colored bracts that it puts out, and sometimes simultaneously, so you have contrasting color. But they are very weak. They are very invasive. And here's something that usually works to convince people they don't want a golden rain tree. Maybe you have one. Maybe your neighbor has one. And you never put that together with the fact that every spring you get these black and red bugs by the millions all over your yard, maybe on your sidewalk up near your house. And when people call the extension office and complain about these bugs, the people at the extension office will ask you, or tell you, oh, you have a golden rain tree, or your neighbor does. And they think that, they're psychic there, and they're not really. They're called Jadera bugs, and they love golden rain trees. What they are doing is actually doing you a favor, eating the seeds of these golden rain trees so that we don't have millions of golden rain trees. And they go away in a week or two. But if that's not something you want to deal with, the really only way to get rid of that issue is to get rid of the golden rain tree. And there are many other reasons why you should get rid of the golden rain tree as well. A great replacement would be this American hornbeam. It's slow growing. Slow growing means it takes the time and energy to make a strong tree. It will turn some fall color for you as well. And it provides nuts for wildlife, and it has medium to high wind resistance. Golden rain trees have pretty low wind resistance. Okay, so let's talk about some of the category invasive plants that are found in nurseries and garden centers. How, why, what are they doing there? These are the ones that are not federally or state regulated yet. We know, because we're learning, that they could be a problem, but because there's no regulations that say you're not allowed to sell them, they can still be available in your garden center. So it's a buyer beware kind of situation. And this one brings up a lot of controversy because people love their Mexican petunias. Now, the University of Florida has developed a sterile variety called purple showers. So keep your eye out for that one. But it's supposed to not produce seeds, or not, it doesn't produce seeds, but it can still spread by tubers. So also make sure you get that sterile variety, but also I would suggest keeping an eye on how it's behaving. I had this planted when I bought my house. The builder had planted it there in these very small sections by my garage, kind of cutouts from the driveway. Maybe, like an 8.5 by 14 piece of paper, maybe a little bigger. That's the area that they put these Mexican petunias in. And I knew they would end up being a problem. So I started pulling them up. 4 years. 4 years of pulling in that very, very small area to get all of those tubers and new growth that kept trying to come back out of there. And now I have different plants growing there. So it can be very aggressive. And people tell me, well, I keep mine in pots. They can spread by seed. So everyone who says I keep my invasive exotic in pots and I control it, nobody I know is capable of controlling the birds or the wind. So it's something we really need to think about. Better alternative, same color variation, would be this purple cone flower. Now, I know they don't bloom all year like the Mexican petunia does, but it is just a much better, beautiful native alternative that's going to bring you butterflies. If you see butterfly on your Mexican petunia, it's probably just stopping there coincidentally to rest or something. The purple coneflower is actually going to attract these butterflies for you. Lantana, this is another one that is controversial because people love their lantana. The Lantana kamara is especially a problem because of its invasive tendencies. I've seen it growing by itself in undeveloped lots, like on the edges where it has been disturbed by mowing or something like that. They are also allelopathic, meaning they emit that chemical that does not allow anything but lantana to grow around it. It's also toxic. It's the bane of ranchers because cows will become very ill, if not die, from eating enough of this. It tastes like candy to them, and they eat a lot. They could die. A cow is a whole lot bigger than your dog, so keep that in mind as well if you have pets you want to protect. Terrible problem in citrus groves. Yes, it attracts butterflies. Yes, it does. But because not everything, it wasn't created to be an evil plant. Nothing, no plant was. It's just the wrong plant in the wrong place with not enough, natural things to keep it in check. We have a native lantana called Lantana depressa, which is kind of a yellow lantana. If you want to have lantana, it's still toxic. All of the lantana are toxic. So, keep anything that might want to taste it away from it. But the Lantana depressa, and I remember that that's the native lantana because I tell myself you don't have to be depressed with this lantana. The Lantana depressa is the native variety. Better alternative to lantana would be this blanket flower. Same kind of coloration. You got your oranges and yellows in there. And again, butterflies also do like the blanket flower. It'll look great in a nice mixed bed with your purple cone flower, with some black eye Susans, just in like a beautiful wildflower bed. Do wonderfully for you. Camphor trees, so many of these around too. And they grow up into beautiful, big, oak-looking kind of trees. But they are very weak because they grow very quickly. And people have told me that they desire a fast-growing tree because, they've moved to Florida and they don't have 40 years to wait for a nice big tree. And I understand that as well, but there are other things you have to weigh out. Fast-growing always means weak. Got to think about that in a storm. And every time I've seen one of these taken down that are very big, they're pretty hollow inside. All these berries, if you have a camphor tree, that the birds love them and give you little purple surprises all over your driveway and car. You also know that all under that camphor tree, you have millions of babies that you're always trying to mow over. Of course, it has wonderful medicinal value in the world, but that's not what we're referring to here. There was a time when camphor trees were difficult to come by. Of course, anything native to China or Japan. And that's what happens with a lot of these invasive exotics. So why were they brought here? Because they were a specimen tree. You could show off your wealth. Like in this area, if you had the money to get a camphor tree and have it sent to the port of Tampa and then be able to send a covered wagon down there to pick it up for you and to bring it to your yard, you're going to make it a showpiece. See, what was at one time a status symbol is now a pain in the neck, and there's plenty of them. So this is, no camphor tree decided I'm leaving China or I'm leaving Japan so I can make a life for myself in America. That was people. People kind of mess things up. A better alternative would be this native persimmon. It's going to get large for you too. You need a lot of space for a persimmon. But it's going to give you some fruits that are usually eaten by the animals in the fall. It's a deciduous tree. It, depending on the year and the conditions, might even give you some fall color. It's happy in any kind of soil, moist or dry, but it's going to be quite big. So you got to make sure you have the room for it as well. This Japanese honeysuckle, we all grew up with it up north, right? We all pulled out those little stamen and took, the honey from the honeysuckle. It outcompetes native plants. Here in central and north, or central and south Florida, I haven't seen it physically become a terrible problem, but we know it's a problem further north. If you're from up north, you know it's an invasive exotic. I mean, it just really takes over. So a much better alternative for us here is this beautiful native honeysuckle. I think the coral color is even prettier than the yellow and white. It's got bigger flowers. What are red tubular flowers going to get you? Absolutely, it's going to bring you some hummingbirds. Just a much nicer alternative to have around. Asparagus fern, this is another one that a lot of people have. And a lot of people have them in containers or some like in beds walking up to your house. It's got that stickiness about it. We all know that it does. So that stickiness, what happens is it puts the seeds on any passing critter that could be going by, and then who's going to disperse it somewhere else. And it becomes, I know a lot of people want to fight about this one too. I keep mine under control. Do you control every passing squirrel that goes past it? Or, the birds that eat the berries and spread them along? No, you don't. So better alternative, kind of the same look, is this native muley grass. Put that in your beds, in your walkway. It's not going to cause any problems at all. It's not going to require a whole lot of maintenance at all. It's going to bring you this beautiful purpley pink hue in the fall. It does well just about anywhere. And unlike a lot of these natives, this one is very widely available, even in your big box stores. This one, this Chinese tallow tree, I remember a story from long ago when I was not the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program Coordinator, somebody else was. But there was even a master gardener couple who their yard could not become certified as Florida friendly because they refused to give up their Chinese tallow tree because of the fall color that it brought. Sometimes called a soap, I believe a soap tree, something like that. Of course, it has purposes that, the soap is made from seed oil, but it really takes over. Something can grow like that in a sidewalk. You really got to be concerned with its invasive abilities. Popcorn tree is another name for this. Much better alternative if you're really looking for that fall color is a Florida red maple. There's even a hybrid called Florida Flame that is still, based on this native red maple tree. Now, is it going to give you the beautiful red color that this tree has every single fall? Probably not. But as if we remember, we didn't get vibrant colors up north every single year as well. Conditions do have to be exactly right to get this vibrant of color. But that Florida Flame is made to give you some fall color and just be a beautiful, standard tree, traditional tree that we're used to. It's going to give us a lot of beauty. This is everywhere and it's hard to do anything about it. This Boston fern. So I don't know anyone who, you can't go out really and buy it. Although no, I have seen it like in baskets and things. How to know if it is, because common names are dangerous territory. We could call different plants by the same common name. So that's why I have the Latin names listed here. So one way to tell, is it the invasive exotic? Well, one way is it taking over the woods like this photo on the bottom. The other way is to pull one up. Easy peasy to tell, because if it has those orange balls, these orange tubers, you have the invasive exotic fern. Almost impossible to control, but you don't want to purposefully put them around your house as a cheap way of landscaping that I may or may not have done in my early 20s. So there are lots of native ferns, and this is just a very nice alternative, the cinnamon fern. And I think it even looks better with the way this stands here and has that cinnamon look to it. Much better alternative, and it likes the same conditions as that Boston fern. This one, people love their heavenly bamboo or their nandina, and it's very common to see around. I was actually even given one when I was taking horticultural classes in Ocala, and I planted it, and I have since dug it up, but I see where it tries to renew itself every year, and I keep pulling it up. What's the problem with this? It's an invasive exotic. It'll try to take over. The other problem with it is its berries are actually poisonous. And I've struggled thinking about that for a little bit, thinking, I don't know many birds who, purposely going to go out and eat poison berries. But when it was explained to me, birds, particularly the cedar waxwings have voracious appetites. Ask anyone who has a blueberry farm, they will tell you that. So what happens is, if a bird came by and ate 2 of these berries, no problem. The cedar waxwings are not going to settle with that. They're going to swoop by and they're going to eat every berry they can find. So the amount of berries that they eat becomes toxic in their system. Why do we want to have a plant that's going to poison birds? That just doesn't even make any sense, let alone its invasive capacities. So let's get rid of those. And what a great replacement for those would be this native firebush. Be careful with firebush if you are specifically looking for the native, because there are non-native versions out there that just aren't as attractive to the wildlife at all. It's almost as if wildlife, the butterflies and hummingbirds and things, don't really even recognize it as a plant. So you want to make sure you get this Hemilia potens and get the native variety, and you will be loaded with butterflies. I promise you that. And again, red or orange tubular flowers, they're going to bring you your hummingbirds. Wedelia, this I see a lot as well. And this could be one of those trade around plants that people tend to do. Hey, look, I got this growing really well. I'm going to give you some cuttings and you put it in your yard and it'll grow really well for you. And you can fill in that space right there. Yeah, it fills in that space and many, many, many other spaces. Much better alternative. Gives you pretty much the same look without any of the problems. Would be this beach sunflower, or a dune sunflower is also what it's called. What I have learned with this is my beach sunflower here. What I have learned with it is it's still growing here. This is the area that originally had that Mexican petunia that it took me 4 years of pulling up. So now the beach sunflower is there and very happy. It used to be in this bed in front of the house for many years, good decade. And I think as the years went by and I kept mulching it, the ground got too rich and the native beach sunflower is not happy in rich ground. It wants sandy, icky, almost barren soil so that it can grow happily there. It will freeze back. You'll be happy it freezes back so that you're not continually cutting it off of your sidewalk and it starts all over again in the spring. And it has these flowers until it freezes. It really does. And they are about the size of 50-cent pieces. As the summer wears on, they start to get kind of black inside the stems and things, and you can cut them back and they'll start all over again. Not easy to transplant. You have to go buy the plants and plant them, and then they'll spread themselves. But trying to pull up a piece and getting it to grow elsewhere is very, very, very difficult. But this is a great native I've had a lot of success with. This one, Moses in the Cradle oyster plant, it's got several names. A lot of people like this a lot, but it has proven to have invasive tendencies. So what's a better replacement for that? It's hard to find, but this will give you, this is a beautiful native that will kind of give you the same spiky leaves and a beautiful flower as well. It grows in standing water, but will tolerate garden soil that is kept moist. So just a nice alternative to find there. This inch plant here, the Purple Queen is not quite on their list yet, but this original green inch plant, if you have it, you know it spreads. So what would be a better alternative to it? Not quite the same look, but it's a nice ground cover, is this frog fruit, also called fog fruit, also called turkey tangle frog fruit, also called matchhead weed. It has lots of names there. These tiny little flowers, and generally you don't have to go out and buy these. These are going to find their way to a yard near you, if not for you, and I just let them be there. This Gulf fritillary is attracted to this passion vine that happens to be growing there. But there's 3 different types of tiny butterflies that come to the frog fruit. Phaon crescent, a buckeye, and another one that I'm not remembering right now, but 3 little tiny quarter-sized butterflies will come. I have this in my yard. It's part of my diverse lawn area. I'm not overly particular about having a monoculture of weedless turf. So I'm very, very happy to have this in my lawn. This one we've all seen, you know, people have used it for house plants their entire lives, and they come to Florida and think, great, I can plant it outside. I'm going to go with snake plant because I do not like either of the other terms. But it has proven also to have tendencies to get out of control. Since 1951, it was deemed a nuisance. And in fact, if you live on Sanibel Island, it is one of several plants that you cannot bring onto that island. So what's a great replacement for that? Our native yuccas gives you that nice pointy look to the leaves, as well as they're going to bring you some nice flowers too. Spanish bayonet is a lot easier to find as far as being able to plant it in your yard than the Adam's needle. Spanish bayonet can get 20 feet tall, has purple and white flowers. It likes well-drained sandy soil, which describes most of our yards. Adam's needle, that is, I mean, you can find it anywhere in any, you know, undeveloped lots, but don't try and dig it up. It's probably not legal to do that. And also you won't be successful. So you would have to go to a native plant nursery that is all actually offering these in pots, but great plants to have around. So those are just a few alternatives to get you thinking. Just because you get rid of your invasive exotic plant that you might be in love with, but you might have to realize what you're in love with has toxic tendencies that are not good for the environment. So those were native replacements. Like I said, there's also very many well-behaved exotics. Here's some resources to help you move along and even try and find these plants. If you want to learn more about invasive exotics, there is the website for the Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council. Also, you can find a lot about this, invasive exotics at this website from the University of Florida Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants. You could spend days. You will go down a rabbit hole here, but you will learn so much about invasive plants. Excuse me. Also, university has an assessment of non-native plants in Florida's natural areas, letting you know, is this plant going to be a problem or not? Now, looking for those native plants, not always easy. You're not going to go to a big box store and find any of these really, except that muley grass, I think. Maybe the Dahoon holly, possibly. So you need to do work in order to find these. The first place to start would be right here, the Florida Association of Native Nurseries. Here's their website, floridanativenurseries.org. They have a search engine where you can find native nurseries near you. It may turn into like a day trip for you. You know, you might end up having to go to Claremont or Groveland or something like that. We do have some here in Hernando County, but they are mostly small hobby nurseries. The people there can be very, very, very helpful. But if they don't have what you're looking for, they may refer you to the larger ones. It seems like, you know, the closer you get to Disney, you know, where the landscape community kind of feeds all of Disney, you'll find larger nurseries there that should be able to help you all over Central Florida. There are some. Also, go to the Florida Native Plant Society's web page to learn more about native plants. We do have a very active Hernando chapter, and you'll be able to find that from that website as well. Or you can always just email me and I'll help you find these resources and maybe get you in touch with some more local native plant experts as well. And again, my email is lilyb@hernandocounty.us. So thank you very much for going with us on this journey of deciding to use this, not that, and enjoy your week.